Today, I'm going to talk with Jason Yip. Although I've never met Jason, I run into him a lot online. For example, I love his talk on Agile with Jimmy. Back in the early 2000s, I was a user of cruise control, and although there are many tools these days that took its place, I do think that cruise control set the stage for many of these current tools. And as far as I know, Jason was one of the people who worked on cruise control. So that's one of the many reasons I look forward to talk with Jason. So in today's talk, Jason Yip talks about one, debating the use of salt with people that have never tasted salt. Two, creating a much better learning environment. Three, what professions save now most people. Four, how to set up a system that is more systemically safe. And five, how to coordinate at large scale. Each on its own, these five topics are really interesting to think and discuss about. And now we have all five of them in just one conversation. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jason as much as I did. I'm Yves from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Welcome, Jason.
Hello.
Hello. I'm really looking forward to because like I said in the introduction, I actually haven't met you before, but yeah, I've met you so many times online. We've come across each other in many different things. So yeah, that's why I'm looking forward to this. So that very first question is what is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in the way you are? Or the way you look at things.
Yeah, that's you just mentioning cruise control. I start thinking, hey, maybe people don't know that. I think these days probably people don't know that I have a developer background, or even into continuous integration, build management, configuration management, that kind of stuff. Like, because I just realized that's a long time ago. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, sorry to bring that up.
But yeah, and I don't really do that sort of stuff now. But it does flavor, like I do understand those things. Like a lot of the things that I think we talked about had to deal with, like building that tool, even doing that sort of things, they didn't change, right? The tooling has gotten more, I wouldn't necessarily call it more advanced. It's evolved, but the same problems still exist. So yeah, like, because I think there's this maybe trend these days where people who are in the agile space, especially coaching space, don't necessarily have that kind of background, and it does flavor like expectations of what people are capable of, etc.
Yeah, with that background, you mean a coding background? That's
Yeah,
what you're talking about. Yes.
the thing of like you used to play, is how I would describe it. That you used to play on the team, and then you became a coach, as opposed to directly going to become a coach, but you don't really have the direct experience.
Yeah, when I was earlier talking with Marcin, that was kind of the same thing. He said, okay, well, we discussed a little bit the fact that you're able to code, and that when you work with a team, that yeah, there's an opportunity to say, well, okay, if people say I can't do it, that you could pull up a chair and let's say, okay, let's look at things together. That brings a completely different perspective, if you ask me. Is this something you do regularly, or do you still do, or how does that go for you?
There's honestly, the like technical problems tend not to, I don't spend that much time on them. Even if I do, it tends to be broader. And that's just more like in a particular situation, what is the highest leverage issue to deal with? And these days that doesn't come up so often. I'm always waiting for it to be the highest leverage, but it doesn't show up. And I kind of go, oh, it's unfortunate, but that's sort of what happens. I do that thing. Like, I think it's again useful to be able to say, hey, I can partner with you or kind of pair up and do
Hmm.
something, because there are situations I think where people get stuck, um, because they are saying, hey, it's not possible, it can't be done, I can't do it. And being able to show that it is possible, like to role model it, and not to take over the job, but just to show, oh, wait a minute, this is actually a thing, it can be done, like you can see it, helps. I talk a lot, and this is the other thing that people don't necessarily know about. I mean, like I've done martial arts for quite a while, mostly Wing Chun now, um, and there are a lot of lessons about how to teach and think about things that I got from that. Like what one phrase that I like, it's most recently this thing called mindful Wing Chun, and the teacher there, he says it's hard to tell someone who's never tasted salt what salt tastes like. Um,
Yes.
and that's that phenomenon. Going, yeah, okay, yeah, that's not just a Wing Chun thing. That's like a lot of stuff. It's really hard to just talk about something that someone has never experienced before. Like you
And
go,
that well, for us, the opposite as well. I cannot imagine a life without salt. So how could,
yes, yeah, that's the trick, right? So, oh, I'm trying to help someone, and I go, oh, we should add salt, and then they go, what salt? Like, what does that taste like? And you go, oh, how am I supposed to do that? That problem exists. Being able to role model, to show stuff, to maybe like engineer an experience so that people, oh, wait a minute, that's what salt tastes like. That's useful, because I don't. In some cases, it's like there's no way for me to describe it. I don't even know how to do that in a way that conveys the experience. It's just not. Yeah, it's like just, oh, salt is salty, and like it's like what? That doesn't make any sense. How do you even say that?
it reminds me of the video I just put online with Rebecca. She talks about a book, How to Taste, and it's my imagination that what's inside the book, because she talks about something that indeed with salt and with other spices, like how does it taste, and to yeah, it there is a world. Once you know something, it's impossible not to know anymore a world without not knowing it,
Yeah.
and how could you experience people, well, not experience people, how could you bring them in, um because it's a world somehow, well, at least for me, I cannot imagine what the world was before I knew salt. Probably there was a world when I didn't know it yet as a child, but that's so long gone that I don't know it anymore. And then, yeah, being able to go back to that world before and bring people with me, that is sometimes one of the hardest things as a coach, to tell
You
people,
know what that
yeah.
made me think of? So, like, you always get these memes where you get babies who first taste a particular flavor, like sourness
Hmm.
or something. That's kind of the thing. We don't remember that moment anymore, but there was a
Hmm.
moment where it's like, what is this kind of thing? And that phenomena, I think, in the agile space, it happens. Even now, even people who are in the industry, if you will, they talk about something, but they don't know what it tastes like, which causes trouble. Like, there's a broader theme where I tend to emphasize that agile should be a reflective practice approach. It's not something that you can just talk about or theorize. It's because it's difficult to talk about. It is something where, okay, let's engineer an experience and then reflect upon it, and then you get a taste for it. Um, and then you can sort of talk. Like once I know what salt tastes like, we can talk about things that you just can't talk
But
about.
yeah, as long as you haven't experienced salt, and yeah,
It's almost
and
like a pointless argument. Like, oh, we're gonna debate this thing. You don't know what salt tastes like. Where's the debate?
exactly, that's a very good point. People debate stuff that they totally don't know, and the other side doesn't remember. I don't remember how it was
Yeah.
before it, so both
Oh,
sides, we don't understand each other's world.
another thought. So this is a thing again. It's a martial arts thing. It's a kung fu type thing. I've seen this in other content. I just saw the guy named, I think, Gurgley. I don't know how to pronounce his name actually, but he's the pragmatic engineer, and he had this kind of model about growing junior engineers. Um,
Hmm.
so there's a phenomenon in kung fu schools. There's a tendency for the sifu, the most senior, like the teacher, to not directly teach students, because you may forget what it was like to be a novice. So you actually teach senior students or some people in the middle, and they teach the junior students because they're close enough to knowing what it was like, and that actually works better. That pattern is actually very common.
That reminds me, when I was teaching .NET, like in the early 2000s, I taught a lot of times things that I barely knew, and in the beginning I didn't feel comfortable until my boss told me at that time, if you only need to be 2 days ahead of each of the students, and when you do, you much better understand the problems that they're facing. And
Yes.
that's exactly what you're saying. And so that's what they're doing in Kung Fu. And that's what I'm understanding.
And even like I saw this model of, like, instead of a pyramid where you say, oh, I just have like the top people teach the people in the middle or at the bottom. It's more like the top people teach the people that are more intermediary, and the intermediary people teach people at the bottom, because the top people may lose the ability to effectively teach the people at the bottom, like the junior people, because they can no longer recognize the problems. They forgot them. I'm not saying that it's not possible, and some people are very good, like they have a lot of insight for the whole process. They never forgot it. But as a general pattern, like, I started to think that's actually probably better. Like, there are some things now, sometimes I'll just say stuff, and I just realized that I went like from step 1 to step 10, and nobody can follow. And I go, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, right. You don't know that. And I skipped a lot of steps. But to break it down takes a lot of effort, because I'm going, okay, wait a minute. What was step 2 again?
And you forget, and these other people, they might not bring up that you lost them. So then it's just before this talk, I was teaching my daughter some mathematics, and I skipped a few steps, and only at the end she said, you lost me, and you lost me halfway. And I was like, yeah, you should have told me the moment you lost me. But it's impossible. That's exactly the kind of thing. I like it. This is interesting how you bring up all these different kind of things. Like you say, the fact that everything you learn from martial arts, I assume that has a huge impact on how you look into life as a coach, for example.
For sure. Like this idea, even this idea of that you're not just coaching something that you can't do, because that's not really traditional in the kind of martial arts space. The teachers are very good at what they do, and then they're trying to convey that knowledge. But even this kind of breakdown of, you actually learn more from your peer, like you learn more directly from your peers, and then the teachers kind of shaping the environment, so that the more talented, more senior people are picking stuff up that like they can no longer do, but they're actually helping connect the stuff. Like, so it's not like if we're saying, hey, I'm coaching in an area, what you're trying to do really is set up an environment that can learn, more so
Create
than
a
saying, okay,
learning environment.
I'm teaching anyone, because you can't, like, one, you don't have the scale, but also you're probably not that good at it. But because you forget that the gap is too big after a while. But you can set up an environment where, okay, everyone's teaching each other, and you can help pull the entire thing up.
I like that, because it also explains a little bit why I like, even after all these years, to work and sometimes work as a scrum master. Again, not as an agile coach, but more on the ground with the teams, doing whatever needs to be done, because I want to keep that feeling. And there is moments that I'm then like, no, I want to go up again, because I know a little bit like what you said, some of the bigger problems are higher up and about working with different teams. But I do want to, from time to time, work with the teams to understand again the real problems that they're facing. That's the kind of thing that I like that. That's to keep that balance a little bit, like you say, to keep understanding the problems there.
I am curious, like, have you, because what I kind of described before is there's something of identifying the people that would be your senior students, if you will. So you help them, like, because they tell you what the thing is, but you're helping them do that as opposed to doing that yourself. Because there are two, I would say those are two approaches.
Yeah, I think I do both of them, but sometimes I like to just go deep in there again, just to make sure that there is other stuff that I don't forget, or to feel. Sometimes it's just to feel the pain, really, because some of these things, what I've noticed in other coaches is that we sometimes forget how hard it was some of these things. It's not because you learned it that all of a sudden some of that work is so much easier, depending on with the people around who still don't know how salt tastes, for example, and all of that stuff is like it's a little bit, but I do recognize also there is a part where you just want to work with the well, I don't want to say smarter, because it's not about smarter, but more the senior, but the people who already grasp some of that and getting to a different level.
Yeah, because
It's the
like
kind
I
of
think
thing.
it's yeah. 'Cause there's I guess there's a framing there where you're saying, hey, you're too good to work with people more junior, and like I definitely don't want to encourage that where you think you're better
Mhm.
than like the direct work. It's more the like there's a
You see
scaling
different
issue.
problems.
There's a
Exactly.
scaling issue there, and also there is kind of a development of that again learning environment where if everyone relies on you to be the teacher, the environment is less capable of doing that.
And you
If
it
that makes
can
sense.
scale to
Yeah,
more people
for
learning.
sure.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing. Okay, that's really wonderful conversations there. So I want to go to that next question, that if you had not been into IT, do you have any idea what could have become of you or would have become of you?
Um, if I go like there's some random stuff when I was a kid, but let's say like my degree is in electrical engineering, so I could see I'd be electrical engineer of some sort.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it, but I probably would have been. The other thing that I think of is maybe like a psychologist or something. It's kind of hard to it's really hard to tell
Yeah,
now,
it's a different life.
especially
Of
like with
course, you
something.
have the life you have now, but
Yeah,
but you have a degree in electronics, so
yeah.
that's not even into IT in a sense.
I did do software engineering because I
Okay.
did do like a co-op or let's get internship in a firm that was doing more electrical engineering, like communications type stuff, which I didn't really like that much. So that's when I shifted to more
You
focus on software. Yeah,
sideways, yeah, okay. But also the cycle, yeah, and this is again what I see a lot of, and I one of the reasons why I ask this question is that sometimes, especially now, I have a son of 19. People at this age, they think I have to know now and make the most important decisions in my life what I'm going to be, and it's like this is not how it's working.
no,
It's you make decisions and your life will shift in
and you have
multiple
to roll with
ways,
it. Yeah.
like how you say it, you have to roll with it and you take some things. Is there something about what you did back then that you can see why you rolled in the way you rolled, and what you would have liked or disliked about some of that stuff? Anything you want to share there?
The main reason why, like I remember the main reason there's a few it's almost like what I remember the first time I heard about engineering, someone came to I think it was in high school, someone came to our classes talking about different professions. At that time I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I was like, I think my mom wanted to be a stockbroker. I thought, okay, I should be a stockbroker, I'll do that. Like but
Mhm.
I had no idea what I wanted to do because I thought, oh, okay, I'll just like be a money person. um but then someone came in and was saying, "Oh, talking about engineering and what the value of that is to society." I'm pretty sure at that point that maybe is the first time of saying, like, if you think about like what profession saves the most people, it's not
Hmm.
medicine, it's engineering because clean water comes from sewage systems. Um, you don't have sewage systems, everyone dies from like cholera and other kind of waterborne disease. That's just what
And
happens.
then you can be in medicine, but you can't save all these
Yeah,
people.
it's like after it's not prevention, right? If you say the
Exactly.
underlying problem is the water's not clean and like be the person that does that, like sets up the systems, it sets all this stuff. So they, oh, okay, that sounds cool. And also it was like, oh, this is like it requires a lot of work. You have to be very smart and stuff. And I said, okay, that's appealing. Um, so that's why I kind of got into that. Electrical engineering is almost like we did a when we start, you go visit all the different departments, so mechanical engineering, civil engineering, etc. And I was just like, oh, okay, these other ones don't seem that interesting. So and it again ended up in electrical engineering. Um, The software thing, I think, is a combination of factors. One, probably the main idea is that hardware is much more expensive to make a mistake. There's no undo button. uh, and it's like I think I
Especially in
remember
these days. Especially in these days. I mean, with 3D printing, it might be cheaper these days a little bit.
cheaper. It's still not as cheap. Nowhere near
Yeah,
as
not
cheap.
cheap. Yeah,
I
right.
remember you getting a robotics kit from MIT to build a robot. I thought, oh, it's pretty cool to build a robot. And then I was soldering something and like fried the microcontroller, right? Like pop, it would just be pop, puff of smoke, it's dead. And I go, oh, okay. What do we do now? And it's like, oh, we're gonna have to order another kit, like order another microcontroller, and it's gonna take like 6 weeks or something for it to show up. And then it's like, okay, this sucks. I'm not gonna do this anymore. Because like let's say I make a mistake, like you even if you mess something up in software, it doesn't take that long to recover.
Just a few
Right?
seconds,
You
or
just
well,
do undo or like revert version control. And maybe that's why I like version control configuration. That's that's a big thing. I think more industries should try to create that kind of
an undo
setup.
button.
Yeah, the undo button where effectively the cost of the mistake is dropped dramatically. It means your behavior is very different. It's very different.
Right.
Like more
You can try
experimental,
stuff.
more iteration stuff. The behavior you need to have when the mistakes are expensive is very like for me at least, I was like, I don't really want to do this. It's tough.
Yeah, somewhere in the back on my library behind me, there's like 3 Arduino kits that we're fried because we put in
Yeah.
the wrong thing, and it's not that expensive, but it was the same thing. We fried one and it was like, oh damn it, we don't have an extra one, so
Yeah. But
it
what should
didn't
you
take
do by
6
like you just buy
weeks.
a whole horde of replacements, right? But
Exactly,
it's
that's
kind of
the
like
kind of thing.
I don't like it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, it's not even the money wise. It, like you said, the 6 weeks, it's going back to the shop and whatever. It's expensive time wise. Okay, my daughter or me and my daughter together, we learned a lot about, okay, electricity. If you put on the wrong thing to that board, it fries it. So that's the kind of thing you want to avoid. So it's a good lesson to learn. But like you say, an undo button would have been much nicer at that level. So that actually it tells a lot about IT. Also, the fact that you say the source control system, the fact that we have a source control system. I still remember developing in a team where they didn't have that. When I joined after using that before, I was like, no way I'm going to work without a source control system. Once you know this system, you want to I wanted to have that because I want to have an undo button to I check in or multiple times an hour just because I want to go back to that previous state.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, like
yeah,
it's kind of I always think about it. It's kind of interesting now because everyone's using Git and probably through something like intermediated like GitHub. So where I wonder how many people actually understand how source control systems work and all the variations and stuff. Like people, I don't know how much people think about that, but it's like a superpower for our industry that I wonder if people underestimate how powerful that is.
well, if I see, for example, with my children, the fact when they work on Google Documents that it's saved automatically,
Yes.
and if I go back to the first times, and I actually had a problem during an exam that a person I was doing work perfect, and the person next to me turned off his computer, but it turned off my computer in the middle of my exam, and I remember his finger on the button. I said, "Wait a minute, let me save," and he pulled it off before I could save, and I've lost half of my exam because of that, and just that idea. And now Google saves it all the time. You can go back, you can go forward. It's like, yeah, that alone, that feature alone is worth so much money, I think. And it's in that sense very strange that we still have software that doesn't do, or other systems that don't do automatic saving and going undo
Sure, with
and
versioning
redo.
and all that. Like I still see people when they're doing presentations and um their headspace is, oh, I don't want to delete anything because then I can't recover kind of stuff. Like that mentality of that tentativeness, I guess, it's still not gone, even though
Mhm.
like there's something about this is what I'm kind of saying. Like if you can create that, enable that mentality where you don't have to be tentative. There's a safety net now, um, which means that you can be more experimental. You can be more, um, you can try stuff out and not worry about, oh, wait a minute, I'll try stuff out, but I have to be careful because I might mess it up. Um, it's if that was more widespread, I think things get very interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree that this is. I remember when I needed to do software, when you needed to go back from Belgian francs to euros, that we could just shift it. At the moment that it was decided, we could just shift it and rerun our tests, and we knew, okay, I don't know, 20% of our tests are failing. That's what we need to change, and that's it. That was very easy to know and to exactly say, okay, we know what's the problem and we know it can be fixed today because we had the safety net at that level.
Yeah.
These kind of things. That's what we want to talk about.
You know, that makes me think, like, specifically like more extreme programming things. Like there's something of there's like this kind of perceived safety from being very careful, like
Hmm.
which is not reliable at scale, because people get tired and so on. And then there's like, how do you set up a system that is more systemically safe, reliable, whether or not you're tired, right? Which is like, oh, version control doesn't stop working if you get fatigued. The tests don't. You can write them wrong if you're tired. But let's say the existing tests, they don't all of a sudden become less reliable because you're fatigued. They still say, oh, it didn't work. And
Exactly.
we
And
have
when
other
you make a
things, even
mistake,
the
there
yeah,
is and the people around you. So
yeah,
the whole thing works together to help you look like maybe this is no, you're doing something wrong, or maybe to you're too like you say, you have fatigue and whatever. That's a good thing because I didn't think about that, and I've seen people making mistakes for the wrong reasons and thinking, and then it's good to have a safety net that prevents you and might even tell you, look, maybe
yeah. I
that.
think it's like it occurred to me just because I was talking about like what the mentality is like when the mistakes are expensive. Like your only choice is to go into be very careful mode, right? Or
Mhm.
at least like maybe that's not your only choice, but that's kind of the reflex. People think, oh, it's dangerous, so let's just be very careful. And anytime it's be very careful, I usually go, okay, that's not a reliable system.
It's
Be very
usually
careful just doesn't scale. It's too prone to fatigue. So then you go, okay, what do we design? How do we change how we work, or change our technology, or change something such that you don't have to do that, just because it's like it doesn't work in the long run.
and I think that's like you said, it's a lot in the extreme programming world. There were a lot of ideas making the steps smaller and creating a
Yeah.
safety net for a lot of these things. So that is indeed what happened there. I want to go to the next question, like because we're talking about challenge in that sense. What is for you a biggest challenge, and why is that a good thing for you?
So there's something that I kind of describe this as like different levels for leaders. So if I say level one leader, I mean someone who's leading a like direct, like an individual contributor, so a direct team member or something like that. And then level two is a leader of leaders, and level three is a leader of leaders, and you can go so on and so on.
Mhm.
So what I find most challenging is interacting and influencing people at like the level three leader up. So where they're leader of leaders, mainly because there's a thing which you kind of alluded to before of the connection to what happens like directly in the work. So because my headspace is still, oh, what's the direct work and all this kind of stuff. As it gets more and
Mhm.
more abstract from that, it's just not something that I'm used to thinking like, I guess, which means the interactions are more difficult. I don't even know because I wouldn't necessarily say, "Hey, is that good for me?" I don't know. I don't. I don't. I don't know.
Well, it's good
Um,
that you recognize this already. I would
yeah,
say
but
that's
like
a good thing.
it's like, does that mean should I try to be less connected to this stuff, or not, or just not engage there? That's where you go. I don't know. Because
Yeah.
like, let's say if it was, and I think you described it, if you'd say, hey, you completely forget what it was like to be on the line, if you will, I
Mhm.
don't think I would want that.
And because you at this point you still like to understand that direction, is it something, a space that you like
I'm
to be
always
in?
very wary of, like generally if you even talk to people, I'm always very wary if you start losing connection with what the front line is like,
Mhm.
because I think you start making decisions that don't make sense, that are incorrect. This is not to say that you couldn't work at that level and just effectively say, here's a top level objective, initiative, or intent, and then
Mhm.
delegate the details because you recognize you no longer have any awareness of that. But it's like a space that I feel like almost instinctively uncomfortable with.
Yeah, I've recognized that when I work with C-level people, that one of their biggest complaints is indeed that they're so unconnected with what's happening below. And I noticed that developers or people who are at the bottom of the work, again, not to judge, but who are doing the low-level work, they don't always realize how disconnected these managers are,
Yeah.
and not on purpose. They might realize, oh, they take strange decisions, but they don't realize that's because somehow that information is hard to get up at that level. And I've noticed that people like us, we sometimes bring up information a level or two up, that these people say, whoa, I'm really happy, because
Yeah.
usually I don't see that kind of information. And it's kind of hard to create a system to bring it up on a continuously basis, I would say.
Sure.
We can bring it up from time to time, and we can be that connection. But yeah, how do you create an environment where that information is going up? It's hard. Or they have to go down all the time with Gemba walks or other things, but then there is a scaling issue.
Yeah.
Uh,
Even then, there's the scaling issue. Like, um, even like when people talk about Gemba walks and things, like, you just work out the timing.
mhm.
If the place is large enough, you can't do it. Um, at least there's something like I started thinking there are. This is where the idea makes sense. Like the problem is still real. How do I create connection so that you don't get um, disintermediation or intermediation that creates mistakes because of like where we're no longer dealing with reality. Like people who are close to this side understand something, they don't understand this broader thing. People who are here understand this broader thing, but they don't understand the details, and it leads to mistakes. So how do you resolve that problem at different scales? Like that's a hard problem. um
Mhm.
I think it's important just to initially to even recognize, oh, this is a thing we have to deal with. um like mostly when people talk about scaling, that's the biggest thing they need to worry about. How do I get a bunch of people coordinated toward a common shared goals? That problem is very difficult.
Yeah,
And
and
some
and
tactics that work at the small scale don't actually, they're impractical at the large scale, and yet you still need to solve the problem.
exactly, that's the last thing. You still need to solve the
Yeah.
problem. I remember with a team where we were blocked by some kind of decision, and at some point the team, what they found out is that they created, what was it? I think a visualization of the burnout chart or something like that, and they created copies of it, and they put it into the stalls of the toilets, because they were at the same floor of a C-level person that needed to take a decision, and they wanted just that person to realize that there was something that was not changing. And so that person then came to the team and said, oh, why is this nothing going on? Well, that's because you took that decision, and we need you to turn around. But you can only do that at like you say, you cannot scale this. That's impossible. They just
Yeah.
found a temporary workaround for one thing, but that's not a
Yeah. It's
scalable
not a
way of
necessarily
dealing with.
systemic thing. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
you could think like, okay, in the aggregate, everyone notices stuff and then does targeted things, but then you have competing targeted communications. Then
Exactly.
which one is the correct one? Like what's this? It gets yeah, that's where I go, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't actually scale up. Um
Mhm.
there is
And you have
something of Like I almost did, what popped in my head is like it's like you need a media organization inside the like with journalists and finding stuff and then reporting them up and whatever. Like that's I guess nominally that's from a political like government systems. That's the idea. That's why I have a journalism because that's what they're trying to do. Oh, we need to float up the things that are important and make
And
sure
then
the
you have
incentive of that organization is that they understand that's their role, and not just to put stuff up there. Yeah, it's tough.
that's the point. The incentives need to be correct because otherwise you get people evangelizing maybe the
Sure.
wrong stuff because the incentive is somewhere wrong.
I would also say like sometimes it's not like incentive. I think is part of it, but the bigger problem I think the one that comes first is to even understand the context, like the role. Like to say, oh, wait a minute. Like, I guess another way of saying this, that to actually understand the problem. Like, I think a lot of people don't even understand the problem. So, which means they given I don't understand the strategic context, I don't understand the problem. So I'll just attach to the number or attach to this thing because I don't understand why it exists in the first place. So I'll just go with I'll score the points, if you will.
I'll score the points
Right.
and without understanding
Yeah,
the
you don't
yeah,
understand the
that's
game at all, right? So I'll just look at the scoreboard because I don't understand the game. So I'll just look at the scoreboard and I go, that itself is a problem. Like if you understood the context, then you even could say, oh, this scoreboard's stupid, right? But you won't
yeah,
say that if that's all you understand.
yeah, well, depending on how the scoreboard shows in that,
Yeah.
indeed, we see visualization that sometimes makes no sense if you understand the problem, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then we're not even talking about mathematics, where yeah, exponential scales and whatever that makes it even harder because yeah, if I remember seeing a politician in Belgium saying, "Oh, this problem now with COVID at this point, whatever, it's not a problem because it's not exponential." And it was like, then you don't understand exponential because it means that next week it
Yeah.
will become there. And
Yeah.
so that's the kind of thing. If you then look at the wrong,
There's a fundamental understanding thing that comes
Mhm.
before the numbers. Like I this is something I encounter quite a bit. Like even when people say like KPIs or key metrics and things like that. And I go, okay, sure, those they can be useful, but if you don't understand the problem or understand what you're trying to do, like none of those things will work. None of them will. There's no way to create kind of a correct theory of reality by just looking at like even a handful of numbers. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you need to understand the
Yeah.
context and the problem itself. That's it. That's really interesting conversations there. Um, I want to go to that next question that there is actually a question below it is that what drives you? And the question that I typically have around it is that are you a driven person? Is this something that is important for you to be driven?
Uh, I'm not yeah, what do you mean by that in terms of driven then?
Well, yeah, what I've noticed is that when I ask the people what drives you, is that some people say there's nothing that drives me. I'm not I don't have an internal drive to do
Oh, okay.
something.
I like my thought for this one was just like I want things to be better. So if I look
Hmm.
at a situation and it kind of it's almost like, oh, okay, this could be better, and then I want it to be better. That's pretty much it. So and it doesn't matter. Like it's almost like almost annoying when I go, oh, wait a minute, this is kind of dumb, or this could be better, and then so you want it to be better. That's pretty much it. I don't really which means I can look at almost anything, and that's my feeling about it. Um, like
Oh,
it
I
depends what
recognize that. I go into a shop and I see some things that I think,
it's
well,
called.
if you would,
Yeah,
you
like
could
and
change it.
it could be anything, and that's the feeling. So, um,
Yeah, but that's
yeah.
kind of annoying sometimes to the people around us because
Oh,
we
sure,
want
sure.
to,
Yeah, but yeah, that's when we get a little meta, understanding our social dynamics and all this kind of stuff. You learn that over
yeah,
time, but still, that feeling's there, right? Which is why you kind of like it could be any problem, any situation. There's some satisfaction in helping improve it, like no matter what it is.
yes. And how does that mean? Because I have this kind of conversation with some friends of mine that says, okay, when you do these kind of things, why can't you just be happy? And I had the feeling that even if I want to improve something, doesn't mean that I'm unhappy about a certain situation. It's just that, like you say, you see something and you see a way to improve it, and yeah, I want to make it
Yeah.
better.
I'd also question that person's understanding of what they mean when they say happy.
Mhm,
So I like from that kind of context, I say, oh, they're equating happy with this kind of contentment.
mhm,
And there there is some aspect if you say, hey, what is happiness? There's something that is like this kind of positive emotion related thing, contentment, you
mhm.
know, relaxing, that kind of thing. Um, where that's not a universal thing. Not everyone likes that. Like definitely when people say, "Oh, I'm just lying on the beach, and I'm just okay with things like that," which is kind of a contentment angled
Mhm.
thing. I just think about that and I'm just bored like immediately. It's like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound like appealing at all. Um, there is like looking at different people. Some people are more into like relationships. They could be say, oh, I want to engage with people, and that's not again not quite the same as contentment. It's more something
Mhm.
else. And then there's something that is more like I want to do something important, um, meaningful. And then there's things that are just like accomplishment. This is like I'm borrowing from this thing called PERMA, positive emotion relationships, meaning accomplishment. Um, and I would say like I'd say, hey, if I say what gives me a sense of well-being, um, like feeling stronger, more energized, it will be making things better, right?
Yeah, that's
If it
that's
was
what
just
I'm
like
hearing.
super content, sounds boring. Like that sounds like okay, it doesn't lead to energizing at all. It probably would lead
I,
to
I
fatigue.
Yeah, I like that definition because indeed, I sometimes get the remark that people say, "Okay, you do so many things. Where do you get the energy?" Well, I get the energy because
Yeah,
doing all of that stuff.
for sure.
It's that's where the for me a lot of energy comes out of,
Yeah,
and it's and some people, like you say, could lie on the beach or on the couch or whatever, and that's
yeah,
for them fine. There
yeah.
is no value in better or worse. It's just like
It's just
yeah,
different.
we
Yeah.
it's just different. That's the kind of thing. When you talk about these things that give you energy and that you make better, is there anything where you say that I feel that this is my biggest achievement, and it could be in all kind of ways of looking at? Does that even ring a bell, an
Uh
achievement for you?
Not really. Like when I see stuff like this, generally, because I tend not to think too much about what I've done in the past. I just don't really think about it that much. So it's hard for me to say, hey, what's the biggest thing? I've recently done something that I helped another person um, achieve something, and I thought, okay, that like, and I like again, I like doing that. Um, but I won't necessarily dwell too much about it,
Mhm,
or too much on it. It's just okay. Let's look at the next thing. I'll probably focus a lot more on what is the next thing, what is the next most important thing to try to accomplish, to achieve, to make things better again. That's where my head is typically at. I don't like when I reflect on the past. It's more about trying to learn from the approach. Like, is there a better way to do it? I don't really
mhm.
like I get how some people like to and need I need to celebrate what we accomplished kind of thing. I just don't really do that.
And is there
Which is
something
kind of
because you
weird because
talk
I
about
sometimes encourage people to do it. I just don't do that myself at all.
and that's why I'm trying to get at is that you talk also a lot about learning. Is there anything
Yeah.
that you've learned in the past that you say, okay, I'm happy that I kind of
That's
came
it's
to
almost more
that?
like here's an interesting learning per se. Like one of
Mhm,
them, but I like is that I don't consider it an achievement. It's just like, hey, this is kind of neat.
mhm,
So like the one of the most recent ones is BAPO, which is a kind of an organizational design thing. by a professor in Gothenburg in Sweden, Chalmers University, I think, of technology, called Jan Bosch. If BAPO refers to business, architecture, process, organization, so it's a way to think about different factors in org design and also in order. So kind of like it's not sequential because nothing is sequential, but more in terms of what should be driving what. So the kind of a typical thing which always annoys me is when people think about org design, the first thing they think about is org structure, which is really the last thing they should be thinking about. Like they should be thinking about business product strategy first, then the corresponding technical architecture necessary to support that strategy, then ways of working that kind of reflect that. And then you go, okay, well, given we want to do all those things, how should we be structured? Like that's kind of like this. It's kind of, I see it as an expansion on structure should follow strategy, which is a much older school way of describing that. Like that I think, okay, that's kind of cool. That was a neat thing to learn. There
So
are
what,
some new,
in that sense, it's like this is something I achieved in learning, and I got
yeah,
my headspace
and I
around
start
that. That's
spreading
the
it. I
kind.
start spreading it too. So
Exactly.
where I go, hey, this is cool. This is a way to think about things. And I'll also, like, I think team topology's been on for a while too, but where I start connecting things to it. Hey, think about this, and then hey, when you get down to org structure, then you can talk about, hey, different team structures. But even when you say, hey, like team topologies, different team structures, what causes you to choose those different team structures? Right? Eventually, it should come back to product strategy or business strategy. Like, what are the streams to align to? What are the things that are commodity to platform? Like, all of that is product business strategy. That's not like, you don't do that at the end, or like you don't do that. You don't do the, oh, what team should I have, until you understand what those categories should be to start off
Well,
with.
what I see more companies already realizing the official strategy between building and buying, for example, that
Yeah.
these are the kind of things. Well, you cannot know which teams to do if you don't have that decision, and this is just
Yeah.
the easy
And that's a
version of
product
what you're
strategy.
saying.
That's a business strategy
Exactly.
decision. Like, what is considered commodity for your business model? And then you go, well, if it's commodity, why don't we just buy something? Because who cares, right? We don't want to spend like a lot of time customizing this, developing it, whatever. But if it's like, hey, wait a minute, this is differentiating. We need to innovate on this thing. Why would you buy it? That doesn't even make any sense. Because then you go, oh, no competitive differentiation, because anyone else can buy it too, and it just makes no logical sense. But which means it requires you to be clear about, okay, what are the things that are competitive, differentiating in our context that we decide to do before you can even talk about any of this other stuff.
And this is clearly a business decision. You need
Yeah.
to think a bit at the
Yeah.
highest level. That's for sure. That's yeah, these are nice learnings. I didn't want to use the word achievement there, but if you
Yeah.
understand that space, that's indeed something that is really interesting and worth spreading. So thank you for sharing that. I want to go to and I kind of feel it's linked to what kind of things are you using as personal agility. Reason why I'm bringing this up is that we're in the agile space. We're talking a lot about scaling agile and stuff like that, and I'm thinking like, well, I think you can scale agile if people at personal level don't have any agility whatsoever. So it might be good to know what are things that you're doing in your life or the way you work on something that is worth spreading.
Oh, so this is, oh, I think I misinterpreted the question when I first read
Uh,
it. So this is more like agility tips applying to like an individual.
you could use at any level. That's the nice thing about
Okay.
these interviews. If people, there
Okay.
is diversity in the answers, so feel free
Sure.
to change.
I'm actually curious now if I think about it from individual. The thing that popped in my mind, because I don't think
Mhm,
enough people do, and like the way I would say it, there is a lot of stuff that happen in large places, in large systems, that happen, let's call it behind the scenes. Not everything happens out in the open for various reasons. There is something where I think in the agile community, like we try to encourage more transparency, do more stuff, but there's still stuff that happen behind the scenes that are, especially when you're trying to move toward something that is more open.
mhm.
Um, and which requires, I don't know how else to describe it, requires a degree of sneakiness. Which is kind of like, hey, whoa, sneakiness, is that an agile thing? And I go, sometimes you got to be a little sneaky to get to where you need to go, because it is a lot of hidden stuff. A lot of, I think it kind of makes me think of Toyota talks about like Nemawashi, preparing the ground. Like you talk to people one-on-one before you talk to them in a group, so that you've already addressed the
Accomplished some,
concerns, gotten
exactly.
buy-in before you come into the room. And which is very like it's possible to do that in a group setting, with enough maturity, so on and so forth. But like,
Before
to be
that, you have
honest,
that
it's hard to
maturity.
have that at scale. Is that reliable? You might not want to do that, right? So then you have to say, okay, we need to do things behind the scenes to prepare the ground. And then you create this group thing, which maybe starts reinforcing the idea, oh, wait a minute, this is safe enough that I could do it in the group. But there's that thing that you had to do before to prepare even that capability. And I think I kind of like humorously describe this as just being sneaky, right? There's all this thing, hey, these are things I'm saying, and you can all see me saying it. And then there's all these things I'm saying that you can't see because I'm behind the scenes preparing the ground.
Yeah, I like that, and it's good to realize that. I remember back, oh, that's about 10 years ago. I went to Bordeaux live in a different country, and I had my then 6-year-old going into a class, and we told the teacher up front, "Look, we're going to live here for 1 year." And he asked at some point to us, like, does the kid know that he was going back? And we said yes. Oh, this is why he doesn't do, yeah, it doesn't learn as much. And we couldn't understand it as parents, because we saw him working really hard, and we realized that was somewhere in the head of the teacher that he didn't want to invest in a kid that would go back. So if we would have been sneaky and not have told them, like, we go back, he would have invested much more energy in our son learning a new language. And I didn't understand it at the time, because we really wanted to be transparent to everybody around us. Look, we're coming here just for a year. But if we would have lied and just said we come here, and then after years said, well, it doesn't work out, we're leaving anyway,
Yeah. This
we
is
would have
where the
achieved
thing,
much more.
yeah. There's this thing of I think of this, the way I describe this now, any one of like all of us who start to better understand how complicated systems work, become consequentialist, meaning that you start going, what kind of outcome are you looking for? And then what is necessary to make that outcome more likely? That is not equivalent to, I'm going to blindly follow these values because they're guaranteed to lead to a good outcome, because that's not how it works.
It's too naive to think that.
It's not even not like in a cynical sense. It's just that if that outcome is important, right? It's valuable, that things are better, that people are happier, more productive, blah blah blah. It's not like, I almost say, when you understand this, it's almost like it's not appropriate for you to just be blind. Like you need to
Work on
understand
it.
like what this dance is like, and engage.
Engage in the dance. That's the right word. Yeah, I like that. So that's indeed, well, that this is indeed the kind of tip that I think is interesting for everybody, because it's at personal level, but you do it for the greater good, in a sense. That's a very interesting thing to share. Thank you very much. Um, the next tip is in a similar kind of way, in the sense that we've been remotely working for, well, about a year or two, depending on people. Some people started working remote earlier on. But is there anything that you want to share about what you've learned the last 2 years, or maybe before? I don't know, when you started working remotely.
Oh yeah, ever since the start of the pandemic, like, I mean, it's hard to remember. What is that, like March 2020 or something? Is when first I just never went back in. The thing that I thought the neatest lesson, that I didn't, it's kind of obvious in hindsight, but I thought it was kind of neat, and I think I picked this up from Automatic, the people who do WordPress, like, because they had all these tips. I was like reading all the tips. So, okay, what is all remote? Like, what are all the things? Because it's not something that I was very experienced in. So I wanted to learn as much as I could. And one of the things, which then once I read it, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I do notice this, is the higher priority of audio quality than video quality. So when you're doing a video call, when your voice audio quality is poor, the mental effort that everyone listening has to expend to try to interpret what you're saying, over time creates this sense of fatigue, right? Because you're working really hard to interpret what's being said. And that effect when it comes to audio is significantly worse than if you had bad video, like, or no video whatsoever. So, like, if you said all you did in an organization is just make sure everyone has a good mic or a good headset or whatever, just doing that, all of a sudden, like, people go, wait a minute, all the calls they feel better for
Much better.
some reason. And it's just because of cognitive load triggered by just the additional effort of trying to understand what someone's saying. And that was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I just didn't occur to me, but that's when I just said, okay, I went through. I'm hoping this one's pretty good, but I was like, spent a time just like trying out different things to try to amp that up, because I did notice that when you could not understand someone, you're like had to concentrate really hard, and having to do that all day, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm feeling really tired for some reason, and that was why. It was just a lot of work.
Yeah, I recognize that I do. I didn't remember reading it from these people, but I do remember telling a lot of people, please invest in good headphones, microphones. It's just worth it. And indeed, the problem with I can invest in my own headphones and microphones, but I cannot invest in the microphones for other people. And it has a drain on my energy if indeed
For
what
sure.
I'm hearing is really hard to hear. That is it's a very good tip. I remember before the pandemic that we in a certain company we spend a lot of money on good microphones just to have them in the meeting rooms, just to have good from the moment that it was kind of hybrid working, but that already made a huge sense.
It's kind of weird, because if we think about, oh yeah, no, I remember when we had meetings where I couldn't understand the other person, then we get better. You complain, you get better microphones. Like, that was a thing. And then everyone effectively is on a permanent video call. Then you go, wait a minute, the same problem we had in a group setting in the office, that didn't go away. It's just now that
it's
everyone
multiplied.
has it. Everyone has it.
Yes.
Like, yeah, and I would say, for like, if you have the influence within or an organization, a company, where you say, no, this is like, I'd almost guarantee that you would see a productivity improvement just by making sure everyone has good microphones.
Good headphones, good
because
microphones.
right now it's almost like, what I'm going to do is get you to do your job, and I'm also going to get you to solve a puzzle simultaneously all the time, which is like, that would be ridiculous, but that's what just happened.
And a puzzle that you can't see or hear very clearly.
Yeah, like, it's very, because it's not somewhat below consciousness if you're not paying attention. It's just underneath there, but it just adds this load, which causes trouble.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, and I think it's a very actionable tip that people can do. And sometimes in the larger organizations, they just say, "Well, everybody just use the headphones you have lying around." Maybe not. Maybe we want to invest something there. That's a really actionable tip, I think. Thank you. So I want to go to reading. I have a lot of books behind me, and I think you kind of are a person that reads a lot of books as well, because I sometimes see you posting about books. So is there, well, maybe not the last book. What is there a book you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was going to say the last book I read was no good, so I don't want to talk about it. That one was Strategic Terrorism. It's not a good book, so I wouldn't recommend it. The last book I read that was good, though, that I thought was like, it's worth checking out, is called A Spy's Guide to Thinking, which is by you have the picture up.
Book?
Yes. So John Braddock is an ex-CIA officer, and This whole thing
Wow.
is just like how does a spy problem solve?
Mhm.
So they have a nice little model, and it's a short book, pretty compact. But also, it's interesting because he uses like a CIA example
Wow.
to work through the problem solving, like decision making model. So like it's neat. It's like it's not like, oh, here's some brand, like just your generic corporate example. No, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm trying to meet a contact, and I'm on this bus, and then this guy comes up to me, and then like, oh, wait a minute, is this guy know that I'm a spy, or is he just trying to mug me? Like it's just like, oh wow, this is like action movie scenario, but still going through a kind of an interesting decision making model. Um, it's called Dada, for data analysis decision action. It's based off of
Mhm.
the OODA loop. So like John Boyd's thing, what observe, orient, decide, act. So it's just a
Mhm.
variant of that. Um, and like so he just goes through this, like, oh, I'm in this situation. How do I gather data? How do I analyze the situation? How to make a decision, do an action? And again, the context is relatively short time frame decision making, high stress decision making because of CIA stuff. But also he said this is also more broad, like when they talk about how does intelligence work within like a country, a nation's strategic thing, like, oh, like CIA acts as the data gathering analysis, and then decision is another department, and so on and so forth. So it's not just the
Mhm.
small scale, but also the larger scale. The model still applies. I thought, okay, this is a nice, simple model. It's very interesting to read about. And he talks about different types of games, like from game theory, like a simplified kind of game theory description, which is effectively just you have like win lose games, win win games, lose lose games, and then like how to deal with that. And I also like to say, for the most part, the best way to deal with a win lose scenario is to try to turn it into a win win scenario. That's what you almost always, which is again like that's okay, yeah, that's right. So even CIA, like same perspective that I would have, right? Don't try to be set up situations where someone has to lose because that makes it harder. It always does.
Interesting that even in spy world or CIA world that they want to go for a win-win situation,
Yeah.
which yeah, intuitively for me it makes sense, but I can imagine that in that world that makes it feel a lot harder, or that's not something I would thought about in that world at
Yeah.
least.
I think
That's
that's why it's kind of an interesting book because it is a context that you like, not like for at least for me and for most of us, we don't know. So it just makes it it's like hey, this is a very interesting story. But then you go, wait a minute, the model is generalizable. It's just problem solving, decision making, and the story is just an entertaining way of describing it.
that's nice, and that's the kind of books I also like. It's not just the stories, but also there is a theory behind it, and you can
Yeah,
apply it to different kind of things. But it's told in a way that it's yeah that it's interesting for the mere mortals in a different, in like you say, in a world that I don't know. Well, maybe some of the listeners know that better than we do, but I definitely don't. I'm not familiar with the spy world. And if you did, probably you wouldn't tell me. So that
yeah.
doesn't make a difference there. Um, okay, that brings me to the question I personally like most of this series. Is there a question that I didn't ask you and that you really think, oh, this is a question that I really like to answer?
I thought it would actually be useful to just even ask like, what do I mean when I say agile? So because
Hmm.
it's kind of like who is agile, but because I don't think everyone answers the same way. Like, and I don't know, been around a long enough that I don't just
Mhm.
say look at the manifesto. I just don't like we were
Okay.
around before then, so I don't say that. And I kind of wrote some things about this, um like I always think when I say agile, there's like four things I think about. Like one is essentially about disintermediation, and I call this reducing the space between problems and problem solvers. And even
Mhm.
for I think a lot of people in the industry, they don't understand the importance of that, of getting closer. We actually talked a little bit about this. Like, why do we feel like we want to make contact again? Because it's that
Mhm.
drive to reduce that gap, because the gap creates problems. Like, why do we have embedding customers and all this stuff? Is because you want to have close contact. Like, if you say, oh, a single embedded customer doesn't work, it's still, the underlying problem is still, how do I get closer to the problem?
To the customers.
Yeah. And I go, that's a fundamental idea that I'm not sure how many people still remember, because maybe it wasn't explicit enough. The second thing is taking smaller steps. We all understand that. Validating every step, which is down to the, like, why do we push testing so much? Why do you push for feedback loops so much? Is because even it's not enough to just take small steps. You have to check against reality
Every time.
all the time.
Yeah.
Like, why you even reduce the distance is so that you can do that effectively, that it's not a big loop to validate every step. And then finally, I call it like clean up as you go, right? That there's something of, this game doesn't end. So it's not like you rush and then it's ended. It just keeps going, which means you have to pay attention to the mess and make sure that it doesn't get too bad.
I like that, because there's many people forget that, or think, there shouldn't be a mess. Well, there is always some kind of mess at some point. I see this also when I had a discussion last week with a client where we're talking about documentation. It's like, well, at some point, documentation becomes stale and is no longer up to date, and we want to clean up the mess. I see this everywhere, and then they move from one information system to another. But it's not about that new technology. It's about cleaning up the mess that they could have done also without going to the new technology.
And the as you go thing is saying, if you want to say, okay, like, especially with remote, now we talk a lot about, like, probably much more about documentation than we would have if we're saying, hey, we're all together, I can just talk to someone, and I go, okay, we're not, we're distributed. So, okay, we probably need to leave more trails, which is, I go, okay, cool. That makes sense, right? That makes sense for the context. But to do that as a regular, as you go habit, not as a, oh, don't have anything, and all of a sudden, oh, now we have something, and then it goes out of date, and then don't have anything, and then we have something. It's more, as we go through, have the systemic happen, cleaning all the time, doing all those things. The thing that, like, that's the style, that's the essence of our method, of our kind of philosophy. If it doesn't have that kind of feeling of, oh no, it's more systemic, regular, ongoing habit, it's never this big, create a massive mess, clean up thing. That's just not the style. That's not the essence of it. That's not the feeling of it. Like, no matter what happens, like, we go from co-located to remote, it's still like that essence is, those things should be the same. Like, this, get closer to the problem, take the smaller steps, test all the time, concrete feedback, cleaning up as like a systemic habit. That's what I would say. That's the feeling of it. This is the, like,
the
back
four
to
bases of
what
agility.
salt tastes like to me. Like, if I say, what does agile taste like? That's what it tastes like. The rest of the stuff is just, context specific, whatever. But that's the, if I want it, like, that's how I go. That's the best I can get to. I want to give you a sense of what it tastes like to be in this world. That's what I would say.
I like that, because it's indeed, well, it's also the cleaning up part a lot of people forget, and it's and
that's when people talk about, like, hey, oh, you're just rushing and, like, seat of the pants type stuff, and you go, you have no idea what this is. Like, you're describing something that's not salt.
No, and it's, well, in the sense that you say, when you're testing it, you're tasting. So you're making something, you make it in smaller steps, you test it to make sure, you taste it to make sure that it tastes well, and then you clean up your mess. In that sense, it's I like that, the whole system, like you explain it. That's nice. Okay, that last question that I have is, who do you think that I should ask next to? Who is there a person that you think, oh, this is a good person to invite?
So I had a question about this, because there's something of, there are people that I go, okay, these people are in kind of, they're interesting people, but they might already be well known, but they're still interesting people to talk to if you haven't already talked to them. And then there are people that are maybe less known, and I think, hey, they might be interesting to talk to too. And I'm not sure, like, I'm curious, like, which angle do you want to go with?
I'm actually interested in both. What I've noticed is that many people talk at first they give the big names that
Okay.
kind of many people know. But for me, and that it's good that you ask, because when I started the book version of this project, a lot of people thought, oh, this is only for the big names. No, I'm much more interested in also maybe the people who do agile in the correct way, whatever that means, in a team that nobody knows. That's
Okay.
are also the interesting people to know. So this is also why I never said you can only take one person or two, whatever.
Okay. I'm going to give
me
you
a
4.
name and
I'm going to give you
wow,
4.
great.
Okay. So there's the first one is, if you haven't talked to him already, John Cutler, who's more in the kind
Mhm.
of product management space, but a lot of his ideas are like, he wasn't necessarily in the early agile space, etc. But like the stuff thing I think are very interesting, very compelling, useful to understand the, like, almost like an expansion of what is this kind of product customer side of things,
Mhm.
like where that stuff, I think he's worth talking to. Relatively well known already, but an interesting conversation, I would think. The second two people are former colleagues of mine who
Okay.
I think semi-famous or sort of famous, but sometimes I always think like the newer people coming in for some reason don't know about them, and I go, what?
Okay.
Which I find weird. But again, this is where, like, there are stuff I know, and then there's stuff new people know, and it's getting hard now to go to trace that. So Jef Patton, and I go,
Mhm.
hey, no, people don't know Jef Patton. Hey, some people don't know Jef Patton, which is crazy, but it's amazing. Jef Patton, I think, worth refreshing, and Patrick Qua. So I used to work with both of
Mhm.
them at ThoughtWorks. They moved on, I moved on, but
Ah, yeah, I forgot
quite
that
good.
Jeff worked at ThoughtWorks as well. That's
Yeah,
already
there's a
something I forgot. I kind of
yeah.
knew it somehow and I
It's
forgot.
like most of the, like, so yeah, a lot of these people we used to work together, and then we all went on our ways. But I think it was a good connection with lots of people. The last one, who I don't know that well, and I don't think is that well known, but he seems to, I think it's worth maybe approaching. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Is Dragan Stepanović. I've noticed him talk about some extreme programming type things, which seems to be okay. It seems interesting, and I think that might be someone worth talking to. Not definitely not as well known, not even to me. But I'd go, okay, looks promising though, and I think it's worth having a chat.
That's indeed the kind of extra things, and thank you for this list because it's nice. Like you say, it's a nice balance of maybe lesser known names, but also names who yeah. I find it interesting when you say that people don't know Jeff because it's like what, but at the same
Yeah,
time,
exactly, right.
it's yeah. If you're a
That's
product owner
because
and you haven't read his book, it's like you have no idea what you're doing almost. Like,
yeah, but it's
um,
out there. Like, there's a thing. I hate to say, we're getting old. We're getting
yeah,
old.
that's the other part. That's yeah, and that is indeed. It's also part why I restarted with the videos that I sometimes invite people that I think everybody already knows, but it's like, yeah, we need to make sure that the knowledge is still known about
Yeah,
getting that information out and talking about these ideas and where we learn some of that stuff. So that is indeed very interesting. So thank you for your time. Is there when people want to reach you, what is the best way to find you back? What could be the best way?
probably the best thing is Twitter, which my handle is JCHYIP.
And I think that's
You have
this
it there.
one. Okay.
Also LinkedIn, same. I think it's the same actually. If you just search Jason Yip on LinkedIn, you could probably find me there.
I
Um,
didn't add but I didn't add the LinkedIn because there is actually a few people on LinkedIn. That's why I thought there could be a risk there. I seen
just
yeah,
search for Jason Yip, LinkedIn,
yeah,
ThoughtWorks,
exactly. Yeah.
Spotify. You'll find me there. Um, then I also have a blog on Medium, which I think is, yeah, there
That's
you go,
this
JCH
one.
Yip. So I try to use JCH Yip for everything. That used to be my university AIX login. So
Mhm.
if people know AIX, it's the IBM Unix, which I don't even know how many people use
If
anymore.
it still exists.
But that's why I use it everywhere, even though it's not pronounceable. But I don't really care. I'm kind of old school.
It's yeah, that's how people can. Well, I've noticed is that it's how would I say it? Back in the old days, when we had a certain name, nickname, or whatever, and if you keep using it, that works around. Especially if you don't have a very unique name, of course, then you need to find a way that if you reuse it again on all social media and all platforms, that's how people can find you back. Well, Jason, I really want to thank you for your time, especially because we're in a weekend that it's not always easy for some people. So thank you very much. It was a wonderful time for me to have a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot more about you, and well, I hope we see each other once in real life somewhere once the pandemic is over, so that
Sure.
we can, when we're again allowed to go to conferences and talk and hug and hang out in the bar for way too long. So,
Sure. Thanks.
okay, thank you. Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.